Hi there, welcome back. In this lesson, we are going to learn about Azure Virtual Machines availability sets. Availability sets also falls under high availability for your Azure Virtual Machines. So with using Azure Virtual Machine availability sets, you can go and create your virtual machines for the highly availability architecture. And within this specific lecture, we are going to talk about two key things. The first one is the fault domain and also update domain. And then we're going to jump into the Azure portal to see an action about the understanding of the concepts that we are learning in these slides, such as the fault domain and update domains. So let's jump into the first thing about the understanding of the Azure virtual machines specific to the availability sets. So when we talk about highly available, we wanted our virtual machines within the data center. We wanted to use the advantage of backend Microsoft global scalable data center to ensure our virtual machines to be available. For that purpose, we can use the availability sets. In the previous lecture, we learned about Azure Virtual Machine at the overview level of the high availability options, and we found that we need to protect against some of the planned and unplanned outages so that our solutions can be highly available mode when we deploy it. So there's no point in having one virtual machine. For example, like in the previous lecture, we talked about the front end and the back end of the virtual machines, and if a fault occurs at the front end or the back end, your entire solution goes offline. So when we are using availability sets, we are actually going to do in place virtual machines that serve the same purpose. So we're not just gonna place one machine, we're gonna place more than one virtual machine, and that serves the same purpose, but it becomes as the backend availability in terms of the highly available. So we're gonna focus on availability, as I said, focusing on ensuring that we have a better control over the distribution of our virtual machines across the underlying physical infrastructure. Because if you take a look at the solution right now, we have three virtual machines that serve the same purpose, but they all are on the same underlying infrastructure, that's a host infrastructure. So do you think that it's going to be highly available? If you just think about that, yes, your concerns might be that, what happens if this is going to be down this physical infrastructure, or you can think in other ways. If a failure happens at the power, or maybe you want to take your virtual machine for maybe a software update or maybe a maintenance, what happens? Your solution might not be available as the highly, because if you take some more examples, even the storage infrastructure or hypervisor or networking power and so on, all that are not a completely highly available, because you're actually depending on a one hypervisor and you have three different virtual machines. So this is where Microsoft introduced availability sets to address such kind of physical failovers, so that you get more control. When I say you are going to specify how do you want to control in terms of power connectivity or networking connectivity or hypervisor connectivity, even the storage infrastructure connectivity. You have that control, and Microsoft offers you that in terms of the distributing the load or the virtual machines to spread over to a different host infrastructure, so that it's going to be spread across the infrastructure with a high availability mode. That's where we are going to talk about the availability sets that serves the actual purpose for us. So within that, what actually it's going to do is, instead of just on a single piece of infrastructure, we can actually distribute our virtual machines across different infrastructure, and hopefully we won't go offline at the same time, because a fault may happen at a single fault in a piece of infrastructure, and that helps as we know that virtual machines are distributed across that different physical infrastructures, and so there's much better chance that the entire solution isn't going offline for us, and this is going to be actually protecting against an entire region going offline even. And we are actually talking about here the faults within our infrastructure of our data center. And now if you look at the physical faults that we need to protect against, could be, remember that when we talk about the fault, it can be a planned or there could be unplanned outages. So Microsoft do need to perform some kind of platform updates to ensure that your solution does remain online, it remains up to date, and also offers you new features that are coming up as introduction to your infrastructure and so on. So to happen all that things as a maintenance, that might be we can say that it's planned outages. And when we look at high availability sets, we are not just protecting against the hardware failures, we are also protecting against the outages that may result a result from Microsoft side to ensure the updates and the maintaining underlying infrastructure up to date. So there are two concepts that needs to be talked at this point of time. So the first one would be the fault domain, other one would be the update domain. So let's talk about at this point of time fault domain. So when we configure our availability sets within Microsoft Azure portal, when you are trying to create a virtual machine, so we need to specify number of fault domains that we wanted to use as our availability set. So like if we want to have the availability of your fault domain, you can go up to 3 of the fault domains. So what does it mean is remember that we are actually talking about having a separate piece of infrastructure. Yeah, so when we talk about a separate infrastructure, the fault domain itself referred to as a common source of a failure. So that might be a power or networking or storage and so on. So what we're trying to do is whatever the virtual machine is going to create, that actually we can say that 3 fault domains are allowed. That means it's actually gonna spread into 3 different physical servers. So if one virtual machine goes down just because of a fault happen on a physical infrastructure, it could be a hardware like storage or networking or power, then your other 2 infrastructures are still running. So that's where the fault domain works. So just wanted to explain the same thing with a different example. So you have splitted the same virtual machine to spin up in the backend automatically. All you have to do is you have to tell that how many fault domains you wanted to use. So you can go up to 3 fault domains. So when you specify 3 fault domains, if you see here, so what happens is the VM1, VM2, VM3, like that total VM6 are created. So what happens, this VM01 was created and it was placed on a 0. That is 0 is one of the physical server, and VM2 was deployed on a other fault domains, additional physical server. Similarly, VM3 on a one more physical server. And what happened, VM4 again, since we know that only 3 fault domains, it's again placed the same on very similar to the VM01 place it has placed. Similarly, it's going to work on up to 3 fault domains. So that's what the fault domain. So fault domain refers as the physical failure of your common failure, for example hardware of your power or networking, storage. All these could be your fault domain failures, and this could be allowed as a maximum 3. Whereas the update domain is a normal maintenance. So what happens is you might be your Microsoft as your infrastructure wanted to update, maybe patching or something like that, or maybe you are doing a server maintenance of one of the virtual image, and then you can actually take that machine as offline also. But in the back end, all these total other if VM01 goes down for a maintenance of updating software patches. The other 5 VMs are available still, and these are available for you to communicate with your end users. And this is a logical grouping of your infrastructure, so that when you are actually restarting, it doesn't restart all at once. So one by one it gets restarted. If you have 6 virtual machines, let's say, after VM01 patch, it's going to patch VM02 and then VM03, something like that. One by one it gets patched, or one by one go for a maintenance, and it will come up. So once other machine comes up, then the next virtual machine goes for the maintenance, and the maximum of 20 update domains you can create it. So when you create, when you just go back to the availability sets, you will have a picture very similar to this of the fault domains and the update domain, where it is placed. All that information you can easily find out. Let's jump into the Azure portal to create an action. You have 2 options to create, either when you're trying to create a virtual machine, for example, by going to the virtual machine, and when you try to spin up any of the virtual machine, you can actually create a availability set. So directly from here, availability options, you can choose the availability set, and here you need to actually create, or you create directly by selecting availability set here. That means it's going to actually set, and it's going to create for you availability set here, and you can choose that created availability set from here. So let's try to create directly from here. As the first, what we do is first we create the availability set, and then pull your virtual machines to make part of that availability set. So I'm going to create availability set here by searching here, and I'm just going to create add availability set here. I'll just choose my resource group and name of my instance. So this is the name of my availability set. So I can say that my availability set, or maybe 01 for each years. Again, I'm gonna see that how many of your fault domains is needed. So as we talked, maximum of 3 you can choose, and for the update domains you can go up to 20, and you can choose the number of updates. So in my case, I'm just going to choose 4, just to show you as a demo. So once you have defined your fault domains and update domain, then are you going to use the managed disk? So the managed disk also gets automatically replicated. So yes, it's gonna align for ARM model, and then I'm going to choose the advanced. So this is where the proximity placement. So proximity is gonna group all your Azure resources physically closer together in the same region, so that there will not be any network latency, and also you get the optimum network through output by placing all your proximity of within that location, so that your all Azure resources. So you can, if you want, you can create that, but we didn't create this proximity placement groups earlier. So I'll just go to the tags and reviewing, and then I'm going to actually create it. So what happens now, it's going to create this availability set inside my demo resource group. So I'll just click on create, and it has created availability set now. So if I just go back to creating virtual machines, I would be able to actually use this availability set. I'll just click on new virtual machine creating, and I'll choose my resource group as demo, and I'm going to give here my VM name as VM01, if you see here, and each year's, and in the availability options, I'm going to actually pull my availability set here, which we created as A01. That's the availability set 01. Or if you want to create directly when you're creating a virtual machine, you can simply create a new, so that actually it's gonna start your wizard. You can give maybe example A02 example in this case, and number of fault domains and update domains. You can choose it, and that would actually going to create right from here. So you have 2 options that we talked. So in our case, we have already created as a availability set initially, and we're going to use that availability set called A01, and the image, I can choose whatever the image I wanted. So in my case, I'm just going to choose the one image, maybe 2019 data center, and I'll just choose any of this pricing, and then I'll give my user ID in this case and the password, so that it's going to create a normal VM. I'm not going to do any additional things here. If you look at, so all I have done is I just informed when I'm creating this virtual machine, hey, you go and use that availability set. That's it. So what happened, it's gonna choose in the backend that availability set. Now the virtual machine got created, and if I just go back to this virtual machine for high availability or scaling, and this virtual machine is already associated with availability set called AS01, and you can see here the default domain is 0 and update domain also 0. Since we just spinned up one virtual machine, it has distributed to 0 and 0. Let's also create some more virtual machines. I'm gonna pause this entire video and I'll come back to you by creating maybe 5 different virtual machines like VM0, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this fault domain and update domain gets changed, and then we can have a look on it how this is going to be really highly available for us. So I'm going to pause this video recording and I'm going to create one more few of the virtual machines and continue from there. I'm spinning up the virtual machines in the backend, and if you see here, a few of the virtual machines already got created and remaining are in process. So the steps are quite same. I didn't actually choose anything else like the VM01 how the way I created. Similarly, I'm also creating total 6 virtual machines. And post to that, if I just go back to my availability sets and select my availability set, and if I just go and check it here, the overview or maybe the virtual machines, you would be able to see here the number of actual the configuration as per the configuration. If you see here, we have selected 3 fault domains and 4 update domains, and now we have total 5. So the different number will come. Why when I say different number, the first one got placed into fault domain 0 and update domain 01 and 1 1 2 2, but when it comes to 3, because we specified only 3 fault domains and 4 updates, so once this limit is crossed, it's going to place in different places like 01 or 02 or maybe 02 or 01 or 12 or maybe 22 or something like that. So that would actually explains for us it's not going to be a single fault failover. Let's say why we are talking about this is, if you think that if you just created this VM01 the same way without specifying this availability set, what could have been happened is VM01 to VM06, all these virtual machines could have been placed in one hardware physical infrastructure. There are high possibility, and then if that goes down, all these virtual machines goes down. So how do we protect that? We can protect by creating availability set and specify the number of fault domains and the number of update domains, and then when you create the virtual machines, Microsoft will ensure that it's not going to place all these virtual machines on a single hardware. Instead, it will be distributed in terms of the 3 fault domains and 4 update domains. That's a plan, so that you are actually getting high availability of your virtual machines. So let's wait for a second to get all these virtual machines which are into the process of creating, and once it is created, we can actually do the refresh. So I have actually created all these, so let me do a quick refresh to see the status. If you see here, till the 3 virtual machines, it actually placed almost the same, but from the 4th and 5th, it is actually placing a different infrastructure altogether, or different physical servers. So that way, let's see, if VM01 has impacted with 0 fault domain, that means what happens is the physical infrastructure, we refer for the physical infrastructure when we talk about the fault domain, right? So maybe if that goes down, wherever you have a 0 only gets impacted. So in this case, VM01 and VM05 gets impacted. The reason being, these two were placed in the same infrastructure, but the rest of the 3 machines were That's a VM02, VM03, VM04 were placed on a different hardwares. So we were actually covered the unplanned outages. So that's where fault domains used. And similarly, for the hardware maintenance or the software maintenance, if any planned activity is going to happen, if you place the update domain in a proper way, it's going to actually save your virtual machines, because it's not going to impact all of them. It's going to impact only one. Let's say if it's a 0, then again VM01 and VM04, in this case it's going to impact it for the software maintenance. And whereas if you see here the 3, it's just going to impact the VM05. So that's where you are actually splitting the accidental or unplanned outages with the fault domain, also for the planned outages with the update domain. That's where you can actually configure the high availability sets. This is very useful in terms of creating for planned and unplanned outages for your applications that are hosted on your virtual machines. Going to be used this fault domain based, and this would be really gives you high availability. And I hope this lecture is useful. Make sure that you check out the link that has been provided within this lecture. Thank you.